So an introduction to Calgary Eats. In 2009, with direction from the City Calgary Council, the Calgary Food Committee was formed and the Calgary Eats Food System Assessment and Action Plan was written. With the plan written, the Calgary Food Committee, now the Calgary Eats Stewardship Group, is dedicated to aligning and connecting Calgarians to the goals of the action plan through food-focused community work and sustainable food strategies. Our stewardship members hold various roles across our city. We are breweries, which you can delight your taste buds with tonight, Village Brewery, city workers in parks who are also here, chefs, grocers, farmers, dietitians, experts in the field, and most importantly, we're just all people who see the need for attention to our food system here in Calgary. Obtaining a local, holistic, and sustainable food system is our goal. The Food System Assessment and Action Plan has outlined 6 targets to guide this goal. However, this is not just an effort of the Calgary Eats. Our goal this evening is to pull together a community effort with like-minded individuals such as yourselves. And with that, Calgary Eats is delighted to have Rollin Stanley here speaking on behalf. Thank you. All right, so Rollin Stanley has worked in 4 major metro areas in North America, in suburban, urban, and rural environments, and distressed and booming urban areas. For the City of Calgary, he manages a portfolio including planning, development, permitting, inspections, property, and business assessment. The Calgary Herald reported he was the right person to reinvigorate the planning approval process.
The home builders don't think so.
And his joining the city was seen as a clear indication that Calgary is achieving success in the goal to be a magnet for global talent. Previously, he worked in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., transforming the face of a predominantly suburban country by creating opportunities around subway stations for higher density.
That would be county.
County, sorry.
That wasn't the whole country.
The transformation is one of the biggest in the nation, and it's helping to put the country on a firm financial footing. County. On a firm financial footing. In St. Louis, he worked closely with the mayor to help turn around the city that lost over 500,000 people in 50 years. And working in Toronto for 21 years, he was instrumental in transforming the entertainment district and the land west to Dufferin. Calgary Eats Stewardship Group is pleased to present Mr. Rollin Stanley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm joined tonight, very fortunately, with Valerie Burton, who is from Maryland, who had spent 12 years with the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Sustainable Ag Program. She'll be talking about that as well tonight. I think you'll find some videos if they play. We had problems with them this afternoon. And she's currently with the Director of Communications at the Maryland Department of Planning, which is actually the best state agency in the United States at sustainable growth, protecting the Chesapeake Bay, and sustainable agriculture. So I think you'll find her piece probably more interesting than mine. So anyway, let's eat. So we're going to focus on 3 themes tonight. Where we are, ideas for resiliency, which is what Valerie's going to speak to. I'm going to move around, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And things to remember. And so, where are we? Well, I'm going to show you in 10-year segments up to the year 2000, then I'm going to go to 1 year, the growth pattern of the city of Calgary. The red line is actually the boundary. Okay, and we're going to do this in about 7 seconds. 01, 10, 11, 12, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. It's not hard to tell where Nose Hill Park is, which I understand at one time some people wanted to turn into housing. And if you were flying into Phoenix, maybe I'm too far away, if you're flying into Phoenix, that would all be swimming pools. Or abandoned subdivisions. So that's how we've grown. And it's relevant because when we think about our future food needs and where we can grow food, we have to think about the areas where we can grow. Now, I like at this point to talk about, you may be reading in a paper where the home builders are saying we have no land supply. It's actually not true. In fact, that number is now today about 2,200 hectares of land that's actually serviced that they could come in tomorrow and get lots for. The reason they don't do that is when they subdivide the lots and register them is when they owe us money. Because just so you know, and it's a little off topic, but I'd like to talk about it anyway, when we negotiate, and we're about to renegotiate this 5-year agreement, when we negotiate servicing costs, and this is important to know, folks, we pay 100% of the cost and the debt servicing to run those things to the edge of their property. They pay for their property, generally speaking, although not necessarily for the fire department or the operator. So we pay 100% of the cost and the debt. And when they register their lots, we charge them a lot levy, and they have to pay us back 50%. You, sir, you and I are going to go buy a car, it's $40,000. We're each going to pay $200, and I'm going to say to you, will you front me the $20,000? What do you want to know? If I can pay him back, or when I will. And you know what our current deal is? I don't know. I actually don't know when they're going to pay me the 50%. Would you do that deal? So, that's just a little side note. I like to give that analogy. But look at what we've got here. We've got enough land up here in the, imagine a Saturday paper. Live in beautiful Northeast Community A. They'll name it after a tree that doesn't exist. Or if it did, it's now gone. City of Airdrie can fit in there. The City of Medicine Hat, 60,000 can fit in there. Mahogany, 30,000. East McLeod, 33,000. West McLeod, 28. South Shepherd, 28. Belvedere, 60,000 people. So we have a lot of room for a lot of growth. And we have a lot of room right now for it to happen right now. So don't believe that's not going to happen. So, this is the future. And by the way, Chestermere, let me go back real fast here, is currently planning, there's Chestermere. Chestermere is currently planning the black hole. And guess what they're planning? Anybody? What kind of residential? You got it, Pontiac. And you know that in 35 years, when they can't pay the bills because they have no commercial tax base, and they won't raise property taxes enough on the residential properties, what are they going to want? Annexation by who? Calgary. The City of Calgary. You're right. So, we have a great interest in what happens here, but little control over it, except for our water licenses. So,
the U.S. Census Bureau, we sent you a census form, but you failed to return it to us.
My mail was piled up like crazy.
Yeah. Well, I just need to fill out this census form with you.
Great.
Okay. How many people live in this residence?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Bags of numbers, maybe 80.
80 people live in this apartment?
Seems high, doesn't it? How about 4?
So, he is the funniest man on the planet. Go home tonight, Google Christopher Walken, Fat Boy Slim, you'll see the best answer you've ever seen in your life. He's a very funny guy. But I show this because, in conjunction with that growth, is the changing dynamics of who lives here. And in Canada, in that 30-year time period, we averaged 130,000 immigrants a year, but we also experienced 170,000 increase in the Canadian population, first generation and up, where the number of births exceeded deaths by 170 a year. In 2006, we see the average going up to 211,000 immigrants, the death rate dropping to 1.8, to the point where by 2032, the deaths will exceed the births, and the only growth we're going to have is in immigration. Right now in the United States, the only reason the population of the United States has gone up in the last 3 years is because of? No, because it dropped off dramatically in a recession. Hispanic people having lots of kids. They average 3.84 kids per family. Guys that look like me, about 2.2. In fact, right now in the United States, only 29% of households are 2 parents, 2 kids. 39% are single moms, of which about 59% are in poverty. And that's a fact that we have to face as well. So these changing dynamics, look at Calgary. You understand population pyramids? Women, men, each year of our birth, you know, we're 5 years old, 10 years old. And you can see in 1986 how we all look like Oprah Winfrey used to look like. really wide in the middle, that's a healthy population, because these are the people, and there's no senior citizens here, so I'm not trying to insult senior citizens, but these are the age groups where you pay your highest taxes. And you see what happened in 06? In 1986, the typical Calgarian was in their mid-20s, now they're in their mid-40s. In the next 70 years, the Calgary population over the age of 85 will increase by 1,333%. Over 65 will increase by 367%. To the point where we're going to see a huge increase in actual numbers in that time period. It's huge. This place is going to age like nobody's business. We're going to have a lot of people, senior citizens. And in fact, local delis will now start stocking Brie. And when will you start the kids on antidepressants? We are aging incredibly fast. And that means our access to food and what we eat. The population is going to change dramatically through immigration. That means what we buy and what we eat will change dramatically. I gave this last two slides to the Calgary Real Estate, CREB? I don't know what the E stands for. But real estate, what, they use two letters for real estate? Why don't you just say CRB? No. It's like yesterday, somebody said MLA to me. I said, isn't that a terrorist group? But anyway, the point is, I told them, you're not building to the market. Boy, the CHBA didn't like that when I said that at their annual dinner a year and a half ago. You're not building to the market. And in fact, after the flood, now this is all irrelevant to what we're here for. After the flood, that big international consulting firm, Kinsey, came in and did a volunteer work. They looked at the whole situation in Calgary. And one of their biggest things was, we're not building to the housing market. We're ignoring the aging population. We're ignoring Generation Y, which will have how many jobs by the time they're 35? 14. 14. 5 years ago it was 7. All these things factor into how we get food, what we want to eat, what we should be eating, and how we're going to get it. Now, what are the rules that regulate how we do food here? You're aware of the municipal development plan, the plan to forecast the future growth of the city over a period of the next 55 years. What it says is we should have complete communities which include community gardens, local food production. We should have green infrastructure to identify parcels for local food production. And we should prevent premature breakup of the ag lands. This is a biggie for us, and you've been reading in the papers recently about our growth management. It's actually to try and prevent that. So we don't get leapfrog development that goes over 3 miles of vacant land and tears down a prairie. So we are actually doing all this. But it's largely silent about food production and sustainability. The zoning, there is no urban agricultural definition. It's not a commercial thing. Ag is confined to development areas, and we treat chickens differently. If you want to get people pissed off, anywhere in this North America, try to say you want to allow 2 chickens in somebody's backyard. That will be the biggest concern over high-rises already. Chickens really piss people off. As you see here, I'm sorry, Mr. Fox, but that is certainly not a pool house. But what's wrong with having 2 chickens in the backyard? Well, people are worried that the rooster will crow at 6. I understand that. But why can't you have chickens? Raising bees. I was going to put bees on the roof of the building I had for my staff in my last job. You know what killed it? The warranty on the roof underlay. And the company said, we won't warranty it. I had them all set. We're going to put 4 beehives on the roof, and we're going to give it away to local restaurants. And we need bees, right? Okay. Now, in Maryland, you have to go through a big, long course to become certified in beekeeping. Otherwise, you can't have it. All hives have to be certified. Now, let's look at food access. Coffee and donuts. There they are. There are 167 coffee or donut shop locations in major chain stores. Now, we're talking about food access now. Because people say to me, what about food deserts? There's no food deserts in Calgary. You want to see a food desert, go to where I worked in St. Louis, where the only grocery store is a 7-Eleven. Or a Walgreens, and Walgreens has a flashing sign out front that says, Coke is on freaking sale. The last thing these people need to know is that Coke is on sale. Here we are with convenience stores. There are 215 convenience stores, like a Walgreens. I hate Walgreens. I hate anything that starts with the word or letter W. It's like the scourge of de-urbanity. Fast food, we have 950 fast food restaurants, And when you look at fast food, convenience stores, and donut shops, we pretty much got it blanketed, except the top of Nose Hill. And if you want to see, 42% of Calgarians live within a 5-minute walk of one of those things. And it includes, so that's all those things we just talked about. 42% of us can get to a donut shop real easy. Now, let's look at community gardens. This is the one I ran in St. Louis. My house was right there, built in 1882. All these houses fell down, and you actually couldn't plant in the soil because of lead poisoning, lead paint plowed into the soil. All had to be raised up. But in Calgary, we've got citywide, there are 47 community gardens on public lands for a total of 140 in total. We actually have a lot of these things. But on public lands, you can't commercialize them, because you can't have commercial purposes on lands owned by us. Farmers markets, there's 10. Grocery stores, there are 96 major chains and 518 smaller retail locations. For together, we get all those, and 36% of Calgarians live within a 5-minute walk of a fresh food producer. About 6% less than the donut shop. Hey, Tim Hortons, if it was Ronald Reagan, he'd say Timbits were a vegetable. So, YYC is becoming the largest food warehousing, storage, distribution center in the West. We are an exporter of wheat, beef, and beef byproducts like hot dogs, dried beans, sugar beans, field peas, horse meat, probably all going to restaurants in France. That's actually pretty fun. Oats, mint, that's probably at the Kentucky Derby a few weeks ago. Lentils, surprisingly, honey, malt, dried beans, and not surprisingly, bison. And we export that. We do pretty good on, we're very self-sustaining in this. Importing, net imports, pork, that's really too bad. I don't eat much, but I love it. Processed meat, lamb, veggies, pastas, cookies, fruits, feed greens, and seafood, of course. There's probably not a lot of access to fresh seafood, but Valerie's going to show you something. We're self-sufficient in milk, butter, cheddar cheese, eggs, turkey, chicken, snack foods, bread, soft drinks, and tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers. We're sufficient in a seasonal nature, of course, and we're good at that. We're very self-sufficient in beer. We're also now, today, in Alberta, fruit production equals 2% of demand. By 2037, we think it'll be the same. Fresh veggies, about 7%, that's going to drop to 5% by 2037. Poultry, 100%, that's actually going to drop. And oats, fats, dairy, beef, 100%, that'll stay the same. Eggs, 91%, we're going to drop a bit within 20 kilometers. Because eggs, there's so many different places that do eggs in southern Alberta and other places. Now, in Canada, stats from Stats Canada. The average Alberta household spends about that much money, $6,000 at home, and a little less than that in food consumed away from home. It's about $2,500. Now, ideas for resiliency. And this is where I'm now going to finish the boring background stuff. I want to turn it over to Valerie, and she's going to give you some examples of things that are happening that we could do here.
Hi, like Rowan said, I worked in the U.S. for the USDA, for the Sustainable Agriculture Program. So I wanted to provide a couple of examples of things that that program did, and I also searched around for some things in Canada that you may be familiar with. Oh, but I did want to mention chickens that Rowan mentioned earlier. They did allow chicken farming in a town I lived in for 20 years called Tacoma Park, Maryland. It's kind of a hippie burg, a lot of artists and creative types. And it seems that the real problem with raising chickens is that people don't know the gender of the chicks when they buy them. Mm-hmm. So if you end up with a rooster, you don't always know it. So the neighbors in the block behind where I lived apparently didn't know it and had a rooster, and it is 4 a.m. that they wake up. So you all know this, that urban farming, I would imagine you do that, urban farming was done for thousands of years, and as recently as the 1940s, and then it trailed off significantly to a more conventional food system, but it's becoming hip again. Local food is everywhere you look in the news. Now, under the conventional system, food travels an enormous, 15,000 miles typically in the US, and I found a factoid about grapes, more than 10,000 kilometers to reach a table in Victoria. In this example, California is a vegetable breadbasket for the US. In Iowa, which is a very big ag state, and they grow all kinds of things, including vegetables, they still import it because of the conventional system, and you can see the numbers. Long, long distance from California to Iowa, and under the local food, you really don't have to do it if you can build up the local food system more. So in urban areas and urban farming, the main thing that you have to think about is growing a lot in small spaces, and people are getting really creative about that. In addition to greenhouses, which can be energy intensive, people are using high tunnels. You guys may know what those are. Those are less energy intensive. They're not powered. You use solar power. You use what goes over the plastic sheeting can be easily rolled up to avoid like mildew. You can get wind blowing through it, or you can put it down in the winter when it's cold, and they're cheaper and more efficient. So a lot of farmers in the US, small farmers, are using the high tunnels. They're cheap, they're easy to construct, they use a lot less energy. Vertical farming, we have a video showing someone doing that, where you go up with trays of high value crops. Backyard farming, we have a slide on that, and people growing on parkland in Toronto. Okay, so this project, if the video works well, is I currently work with the Maryland Department of Planning. We gave an award to this project in Western Maryland, which is a depressed area. It's called Appalachia, and there aren't that many jobs. The economy it's kind of rough, and the land where they did this ag operation was completely a mess. It had been strip mined for coal, and then after Hurricane Katrina, the Federal Emergency Management Agency parked all these trailers there before moving them down to the Katrina area around New Orleans. So the land was just unusable. So what they did is they reused the land, put up greenhouses, compost operation, and they're growing all kinds of high-value things there, and they're giving job training to people in the area who aren't doing that well, but now they can supplement their income. Oh, you're not going to have sound? Is there anything you can do, Rollin, to make it play? Okay, well, this is, I'll just tell you a little bit more. That's too bad. So this is the greenhouses that they constructed, and they're bringing people in all the time to learn how to do it. That they have a very recycled operation where they collect all their rainwater and use it to water in the greenhouse. They compost everything and use it for their fertilizer, and they're starting to sell it. They're gearing up, and they're teaching people in the area how to do it. It's a very cool operation. That's too bad the video wouldn't play. I found in Toronto, you guys may know this, it's much closer to you than it is to me, this Fresh City program. They have this 6-acre farm on a public park, and they use a greenhouse, and at the site they do workshops, and they process vegetables. And what they're doing is they deliver bags, and they're all about the convenience for urban residents who are very busy. So you can order a bag and they'll bring it to you, and they even think about, they think about condo dwellers and delivering and how it's difficult in multifamily, but they've surmounted that, and they even give you a discount if you and your neighbors in the condo sign up. And I hope this one works. I don't think so, because it has, that's too bad.
Keep talking. Really, keep talking.
Okay. I don't know that much more about that one. That's not one that I have personal experience with, but they seem to be doing very well. The guy who, in the video, who founded the program talks a bit about how they got started and why it's good. And I want to try the Frostburg one. This is the one in Maryland that I was talking about with the, oh good.
Very hard hit, and people need jobs. The guy who was really the starter of the project is Paul Kazak, who was with DNR, Department of Natural Resources. He began thinking, what about having a place that could be an incubator, so to speak, for local foods and forest about 15 volunteers, and we'll collect acorns and beech nuts, and like for example, we have a big walnut population that we collect now. And we husk them, we protest, we scarify, we stratify, whatever we have to do to get them the basic fish planting, these seeds in the springtime. So locally, there's a lot of interest in native plants, and I think that's getting more popular. But in the works, we definitely hope to do it in some areas that I mentioned. There's stream bank restoration and strip out areas that really need it like now.
These have the capacity to generate anywhere from $8,000 to $20,000 a year per high tunnel. If you grow high value crops like tomatoes, raspberries, greens, things like that.
The food production part is really interesting. It wasn't one of our main focuses to start, but it quickly became very easy for us to do that here because of our setup. We all have south exposure. One of the big things that we did was vertical growing in tomatoes. So basically, it's usually a couple different varieties that grow vertically. So you want to plant one plant per square foot. So you want to maximize what comes out revenue-wise and food production. So we have that, and we can have a high tunnel full of tomatoes. So we can come to around it, and we'll hang well, and it's fun with.
Do the math and figure that one person essentially operates 4 of these single-handedly and get a really good annual income, very lucrative job.
We'll have a site where you may be an entrepreneur and you have an idea. Maybe you want to go into the business of growing lavender, which at this point in time is a very hot item in agriculture. And so you could come here, you could work with us, plant seeds, and develop your protocol for growing your plants. We will monitor them carefully. We'll measure their growth characteristics. We'll measure the product as it develops. So it gives you as an entrepreneur, agricultural entrepreneur, a chance to test your ideas.
So they won an award from my program at the state, but they've also won national awards. They've done a lot there. And then if you can do the Toronto one there.
Most people buying their groceries, it's what they call in a market parlance, the Lord all connected. So it's something that you do sort of automatic. It's not something that you typically put a lot of thought in. And that's part of the problem with our food system, right? It's discovered by nursery to a certain extent. People just have been trained a certain way and they just buy whatever they bought last time. The blocks introduces elements of somebody else helping you choose the products for you, and an element of unparalleled convenience. It's like getting a gift every week. It kind of forces you to help. You get these ingredients, and you have to figure out what to do with them. That makes you look at food in a really different way. You're much more in control, and you're part of the creation process. I think most people start off, they have the right values. So when you speak to somebody, you say, okay, do you really want to be eating food that's not good for you? They'll say no. Do you really want to be eating food that's not good for your planet? They'll say no. I think what our mission is to make it so it's easy for people to live their values. Fresh, organic products, delivered by your door.
The one other video we had was one out of a project in Chicago where they really perfected the vertical farming. I had the opportunity to visit that farm, and this is actually a Toronto project, and it just blows your mind. They've done so much with such a small space that we can play this video, but real quick, this other one in Toronto, the interesting thing about city seed farms is that they actually use people's backyards, and they do these kind of rental agreements where they'll use your yard, and then in exchange you get weekly food, which to me sounds like a great deal because you don't have to do the gardening, but you get the benefit of all the food. But okay, so this one in Chicago, if you can, I guess I'll try to play this one. Oh, looks like it's going to work.
Can't hear?
Oh, I don't know.
ahead and just describe.
Okay, so he's showing all those different things that they grow in their greenhouses, and they grow them on shelves with these drip irrigation systems. You can see behind them that all the shelves just go up. Yeah, it's also really very jerky. And then they basically, because they're high value crops and they sell them to restaurants and markets in the city, they do very well.
Tell them about how the fish are in there and they use the...
Yeah, they do the aquaponics, and so they're raising the tilapia fish in tanks, and then they take that water and use it to fertilize the plants. So it's all in a closed cycle. I'm not doing a great job just for this guy. Will Allen is a much sought after speaker in the U.S. As I said, I did this tour, and the man that you can kind of see there, he gave the tour, and he's very dynamic. And so he's showing the tilapia system and the recycling of the fertilized water. Obviously, the waste from the fish becomes a real benefit as opposed to a problem. Okay. Lastly, you're getting close to lastly, I talked about the high tunnels, and that's what they look like. They're really very basic, but they're very effective. Excuse me, farmers are using row covers. I know here your climate is, your growing season's kind of short, but these are all ways that you can extend the season, excuse me. And you choose varieties that can do well in the cold, and also find good ways to store your crops. Now, the program that I used to work for, the Sustainable Agriculture Program, gave out grants. I worked there for 12 years, and they gave out different types of grants, and the most fun by far to publicize was the farmer grants, because they were always doing really, really interesting things. So farmers would get these grants as seed money, pun intended, to practice new things on their farm. And I found a project to discuss was this Oregon farmer. To extend the season into the winter, he started a farmer's market. They stored a lot of their crops. They used greenhouses and high tunnels, and they did very well. And you can see the quote there. We found people came no matter what the weather, although sunny days always brought in more, and that plenty of interesting and fascinating produce was available, and they considered it a big success, and they kept on with it. So there are lots of things you can do even in a cold climate. And that's it for my section. Thanks.
Now, in my concluding slides, I'm going to pick up what Valerie's been talking about, because if we talk to the staff at the city that helped organize this, when they brought a report on food, what did you call it, resiliencies?
No, it's an assessment and action plan.
Yeah, food assessment and action plan. I'm not sure a lot of the council members really understood why we were doing this. And I often find that in some jobs where nobody liked historic preservation, we rebuilt the city of St. Louis on it, we made it an economic argument. And you'll see that, the things that Valerie's talking about in an economic standpoint in a few moments. So things to remember. Positive signs. Farmers markets. In Alberta, farmer market sales tripled since 2004 to 724 million. 74% of Alberta households went spending $670 at a farmer's market annually. And why did I put 80% of the food? Oh yeah, 80% of the food at these markets is from Alberta. So, also in Alberta, positive sign, restaurants. 374 million of local food served in a year, 46% price premium for local food. So they're charging higher values. Restaurant selection, 25% of people choose a restaurant because it serves local food. So these are the numbers that we've got to get out there so people can understand why, from an economic standpoint, it's important. In Alberta, 95% of the households bought local foods last year, at some point. In Calgary, 4%, so I'd say 4%, is almost all local food of people who buy their food. 21% of people think they buy half of their food locally, from local producers, and 41% of the folks think they buy a quarter of their annual food locally. Those are high numbers. In Calgary, in terms of community gardens, look at the numbers, how we've jumped from 11 to 140, and I understand that we're trying to create 4 orchards, I believe, in parks. Again, that can't be a commercial operation under current rules. And so, also with community gardens, it's estimated that for every $1, it results in a multiplier of $1.4 to 2.6 in the local economy. And out of the households that spent $10 on local food, it can create, if all the households in Ontario spent $10 in local food, it would generate $2.4 billion or 10,000 jobs. And then Made in Detroit, if they shifted 20% of their food spending to local, it would create just under 5,000 jobs and $20 million in business taxes. And that city's bankrupt. So these are big numbers that people never talk about. Detroit's thinking about building a light rail, like all of a sudden people are going to flock back because there's a light rail. Trust me, I've done it in St. Louis, it doesn't happen. But you start producing local food and creating jobs, that really changes people's lives. And the other thing we have to remember is we move into the marketplace, because we're being discovered by big retailers from the south, is that in inner city, the highest penetration of inner city food markets, eating and drinking, is KFC, Starbucks, McDonald's, Burger King, Denny's, Subway, Wendy's, Taco Bell, IHOP, Pizza Hut, Chili's, thank God it's Fridays, Red Lobster, Olive Garden, Applebee's, Outback, Cracker Barrel, Ruber Tuesdays. There isn't a grocery store in there. Well, they're not a restaurant. But the point is, we're not getting good things. So when we go back to that access to food with all the donut shops we got, that's what it's talking about.
Yeah.
So, it's a good laugh. The American Institute of Architects did it, and I get in trouble every time I show it. But the point is, complete communities are about access to libraries, markets, restaurants, hardware stores, etc. Food. It also includes food. And when you think of the environment we've built and the rapidly aging population, and they won't be driving and they're living on a cul-de-sac, how are they going to get access? And some aldermen are already coming to me, Ward Sutherland, and saying, what am I going to do? I've got these older people. Can I put 6 seniors in one house, have the Victorian Order of Nurses come in and help them? Because they can't get around because they live on the end of a cul-de-sac. How we build ourselves really dictates how we access these things. And it's going to be a challenge for Calgary because of the environment that we've built. Deborah Jackson said she likes shopping at the Dollar Palace because it's convenient and casual. I don't have to get dressed up like I'm going to Walmart. Remember, it's a good laugh, but we have to realize that access to food means access for everyone. Whether they go to Walmart to get their food, and Walmart's one of the biggest food retailers in the world now. We have to provide access to good food for everybody. And I urge you to look at the 100-Mile Diet. Who's heard of this? Yeah, it's really quite fascinating. Anybody got a copy of the book? Ooh. So who has a copy of the book? Oh, good. Can I borrow it? And what happens if wild animals all ate fast food? That's what happens. So thank you very much.